Welcome to the Good Reading Podcast, proudly sponsored by Book People Gift Cards. A Book People gift card is the perfect gift for readers of all ages. Simply order your gift card online at bookpeoplegiftcards.org.au. Redeem at any one of over 500 bookshops across Australia. Visit bookpeoplegiftcards.org.au.
A veined red laminated table sat near the front window where Adelaide could maintain a watch over everything in Gunnawah and everyone. A coin-fed jukebox sprouted from a loud orange wallpaper just above the table, 5 cents a song. Adelaide had spent far too many coins there, just so she could miss the school bus home and hitch a ride with her older brother Tom, which meant her arrival home would coincide with their mother's pre-dinner lie-down. It was at her after-lunch lie-down. But, she told herself, that was in the past. No more avoiding people. She was a cadet journalist now, whatever that meant. And Valdene seemed to have faith in her, even if her mother didn't. "Milkshake, Val?" Tina said from behind the till. "No, I'll have a cappuccino this morning, thanks, Teen. And an egg and bacon sarnie. Tired as all get out, I am. And you, Adelaide, a blue heaven?" "No, I'll have a cappuccino too, thanks, Mrs. K."
Ronni Salt is a political and media commentator with a rural and legal background and a strong interest in environmental issues. Today I'm talking to Ronni Salt about her first novel, Gunnawah. Ronni Salt, welcome to the Good Reading Podcast.
Good morning. Thank you, Greg, and thank you for having me.
Gunnawah is your first novel, but the Ronni Salt pseudonym has been around for a while. Who is the mysterious Ronni Salt, and in what dimension does she live?
Well, Ronni Salt's a persona of mine. Well, it's sort of half a persona, really. So it's a pseudonym, and I started using it on social media. I should add my first name is Ronni, so it's only semi-anonymous. I started using it on social media, and when I decided to write a novel, and I sort of was doing investigations and social commentary and all that kind of thing, and when I decided or was urged to write a novel, one of the two, I just decided to keep the brand. So yeah, it's an interesting persona because it is part of me in a way.
And it kind of has its living space on Twitter, or X, formerly known as Twitter. What happens there?
Well, actually, it's interesting because I'm not on there as much since the delightful Elon Musk took over and and the Trump team came on. So I do have an account on Twitter X or Shitter or whatever people want to call it, but I'm not on there as much. I'm usually on Blue Sky. So it's a very, very similar platform. But usually on Twitter, I was more sort of making political commentary and investigating issues and all sorts of things, sometimes organising fundraisers, whatever.
I was reading a David Hardacre article in Crikey recently, which is primarily about you. David wrote, "Twitter is a swamp. It's nasty. It destroys reputations. It enables attacks, frequently misogynist, that are so harsh it has driven people in public gaze to hide away." Why does Ronni Salt want to get mixed up in that?
What an interesting question. Yes, good old David. I don't know whether it's an interesting online world because it's something that you can curate. Unlike the real world where you're walking into a supermarket or you're walking down the street, you have to encounter who you encounter and you have to deal with people in real life as you do. And in the online world, which is why sometimes I'm very, I'm sort of curious about how we're going to curate that moving forward. In the online world, people can be whoever they want to be if they want to, but you can also curate your own world. I often use the phrase borrowed from Van Badham, my timeline is not a democracy. So it is what you make of it. Yes, it is nasty. Yes, it can be horrible. But if you use the block button and the mute button frequently and you don't engage with trolls and don't become involved in that world, it can be quite beneficial. I mean, we've done some fantastic things in the online world, some amazing things on Twitter. And one that comes to mind is just recently a friend of mine. She's the coordinator and runs a very small charity called Australians Knitting for War-Torn Children. And it's for children in refugee camps in the Middle East. And she's been running that by herself with a small group of volunteers, or large group of volunteers, but largely herself organising the shipping for the better part of, 7 or 8 years. And just recently, because of the a lot of the issues in the Middle East, they had a lot more demand for what they were doing. And she came up with a shortfall for the shipping. And it was about $8,000, $8,500 that they needed. And the problem was, Greg, that the shipping containers needed to go. They needed to get on the ship in order to get there within the allotted time. And so I sort of said to her, look, I've got a lot of followers on Twitter. You know, surely we can use that as we have done for good. So we had a week to raise the funds, to raise the $8,500. So I put up a video, put up the shots. We raised that money in 16 hours. We often hear the bad, but I've seen so much good as well and so much hope. And there are some beautiful, wonderful, kind-hearted people who come to social media, and there are people who are quite lonely. There are people who are disconnected. There are people who need a community and need like-minded people to talk to. So in that regard, yes, it can be a beautiful part of it if that's what you want to make of it.
Let's move from one community to another. The community of Gunnawah, a small town in the Riverina in 1974, population 989 with ambitions to hit the 1,000 mark. You write with the assurance of a lived experience with places like Gunnawah. What is the Riverina to you?
I am a child of the Riverina. It is my home, where I feel at home. It's where my heart beats. It's where my soul is. Yes, I do write with the lived experience of someone who's lived there and somebody who loves it.
Given its reputation and its criminal associations, is it easy to write about a place like the Riverina, both practically and creatively?
Oh, you asked some wonderful questions, Greg. You really do. It's interesting because in a way, having said that it's my home and it's what I know like the back of my hand, that actually can pose difficulties because there is so much you want to say and so much you want to pile in that you know, good writing is often leaving a lot of things out, and you can leave things out. So writing about it practically, I think, was not too bad. Writing about it creatively was a whole other issue because I had to go back 50 years in my mind, and I don't really have any memories of 1974. So it was my collated memories, you know, family stories, a lot of it just absolute mythology and, as my late father would say, unadulterated horse shit. But a lot of it, but you know, it was easy and it was difficult. It was both. Yeah.
Let's get to our central character, Adelaide Hoffman. Adelaide Hoffman's ambition is to get the hell out of Gunnawah. Does ambition play a role in this story, and where does Adelaide Hoffman's ambitions fit in?
Yes, it does. Yeah, it's actually ambition and confusion. It's probably difficult for a lot of people who read the book to sort of comprehend 1974 in a very small country town when you're 19, probably the equivalent these days of being 8 or 9 in terms of your world experience. There were no mobile phones, there was no internet. The world came to you through a couple of selected radio stations and a couple of selected TV stations. When you're a kid growing up on a farm, you don't get to hang around at the local shopping centre. You don't get to play with kids over the street. You interact purely and only with the kids on the school bus. And so it's a tiny, tiny, tiny world. And so to say that Adelaide is naive is probably understating it. Whilst she's intellectually intelligent and she's curious and she knows she wants to get the hell out of there, she is incredibly unworldly, you know, almost to the point where she interacts with the mafia. And I think it's the promos already have already said, you know, it's organised crime, it's mafia in the Southern Riverina. And she, you know, interacts or hears about the mafia and Ndrangheta, and she has no idea what it is. None. Never heard of it. Hasn't got a clue.
She's a very singular character too. There's a natural curiosity about her, and she's a great observer of her environment too, a budding detective perhaps. I particularly enjoyed that scene where she undertakes that late night escapade that leads to the detection of a mysterious marijuana plantation that turns out to be soybeans. Soybeans, a black market crop in Gunnawah.
Yes, yes, not quite. But one of the things that the organised crime marijuana growers did, which is quite well known, is that they grew their marijuana crops in between screening crops or legitimate crops. So they would grow them in between soybeans, grapevines, orange trees, that type of thing. So they grow them in between there. So yes, poor old Adelaide manages to grab hold of a plant and run away when she's doing her late night investigating. But unfortunately, the plant that she grabs hold of is just an ordinary old soybean plant, which is terribly boring. And she doesn't quite realise what she's done as yet.
Gunnawah really is a town where everybody knows everybody else's business. And as the editor of the Gunnawah Gazette, that's Valdene Bullark's core business. And Valdene Bullark is a force.
Yes, yes, she is. She's a complicated character. She's sort of based on a couple of women that I know or knew, and I wanted her to have an interesting and curious past. So Valdine and her late husband Colin bought the newspaper, when it was ailing and really not very good at all, and built it back up again. But Valdine herself is from a very ordinary background, and she once was a working girl in King's Cross. We don't go into that terribly much. It sort of floats under the surface a bit. But Valdine loves her jewellery, loves all the trappings of her success. She dresses in a way I like to call Gucci gangster. There's a tiny, tiny element of, I don't know, Judy Moran or someone like that from the organised crime families in Valdine, just a tiny element of that. But I wanted to have someone that had some depth and some, dimensions to them rather than just a nice, sweet middle class couple running it and smiling at the customers.
The townsfolk are quite interesting too, just before we get on to something else that makes this story important. I get a real sense of living in a country town when I read your story, strong sense of character. And I love some of the names and some of the characters you create. Michael de Rossi, of Calabrian stock, of course, the member for Hovel. Jack Overland, the new constable, and senior constable Boxer Nunn. Victor and Oksana Babich. Oksana may possibly be a Russian mail order bride. And the Hennigans, of course, all perhaps centred around the local milk bar run by Con, master of the Olympia coffee machine.
Yes, Conantina Catopodis, because of course, most, or not most, but a large amount of New South Wales rural towns had a Greek cafe, Greek milk bar in them. And also, if you scratch the surface, there's a lot of immigrant stories and a lot of people from immigrant stock. They may not be in the majority, but if you go looking for them, they're usually there. So it was very important to me that I included the diverse realities of a country town that maybe isn't always seen on the first look. I have to say almost all of them are sort of based on real life people. Or I had a friend of mine who grew up just outside of Tamworth in the 70s, and I asked him to proofread the book way back when I was only about halfway through, and he rang me after about the third or fourth chapter, and I'm going to use an anonymous name here for the mayor, but he rang me and he said, "Good God, you know Kevin McAlpine." And I said, "Who's that?" Because he was reading about the mayor, Barry Hennigan. He said, "You've met Kevin McAlpine." And I said, "No, who's that?" And he said, "Oh, he was the mayor of Tamworth when I was growing up." So it's sort of there's something rather universal about some of the characters. If you go to most, or if you went to most rural towns in Australia in the 70s, you would have found one of them there.
Michael de Rossi, as I said, the member for Hovel and of Calabrian stock. I'm intrigued by the call he took from Mr. Frank Taglioni on behalf of Gino Scarpa. I just love saying those names. Michael de Rossi has a pet project, and that's the prospect of the Gunnawah Burley irrigation project. Once a pipe dream, now a reality. What does that mean for the town of Gunnawah?
It's a project that's based in reality, of course. It's a project that Michael champions, but of course he hasn't really had anything to do with the development of it. He just comes in and takes all the kudos for it, which is very unlike a politician. And he is trying to champion the Southern Riverina irrigation scheme. And what that will mean is Gunnawah is based on the Murray River, on the Murray, and the Southern Riverina irrigation scheme will come out of the river and feed the inland Riverina from the Murray. And that will open up all sorts of possibility for the towns and the farming communities around there in terms of irrigation can bring basically intensive agriculture and intensive horticulture, which means money, which to the grasping mayor, Barry and Cheryl Ann Hennigan, of course, means much more money for them.
This new irrigation scheme means change for Gunnawah. And while this story is about change in rural communities, it's also about water. And water is probably the most important commodity we have. No water, no life. Why do you write about water?
I know a bit about it. I'm no expert. I know a bit about it from a grassroots perspective, literally and figuratively. And what irrigation can bring in terms of change, economic change, social change, it also comes at a very heavy price. Nothing ever comes at the detriment of something else. And irrigation has unfortunately brought massive environmental problems for Australia's farming sector, agricultural sector. I know if there's any irrigation farmers listening to this, they will deny it vehemently, but it has, particularly further up north. And I wanted... irrigation water was something that I knew about, but I also wanted that to be able to blend in with the story of the cannabis growing, because it's very, very difficult to grow commercial cannabis on a commercial scale without irrigation. So I knew that it had to make an appearance somewhere. So I blended it into all of the stories about Michael de Rossi wanting to sort of rise to power and about how the mafia needed that for their crops.
While Gunnawah certainly has a political dimension, it's also got a social dimension too. You really display quite an affection for small town life. Is that still the case for you?
Yes, it is. Yeah. It's in a quiet little corner, even though it's a crime novel. It's not a hard-boiled crime novel. It does have violence. It's not a cozy crime novel, by the way, for people who are wondering about, scones and cups of tea. That's not going on. But it brushes up against the cozy sort of crime novel genre. Small town life, to me, there's a certain viciousness to it that I don't gloss over. The gossiping and the sort of incestuousness and the paranoia and sometimes the claustrophobia of seeing the same people every single day of your life. So that breeds a certain tolerance in you. But somewhere way off in the corner of Gunnawah, very, very softly, is a tiny little love song to rural Australia and small town life and some of the beauty of that. And I'm not sure if people will pick up on it or not, but yes, I do have a deep affection for small town Australia. Yes.
Ronni Salt, thanks so much for sharing your story, and thank you for joining me on the Good Reading Podcast.
Thank you so much, Greg.
I've been talking to Ronni Salt about her first novel, Gunnawah. It's published by Hachette, and you can find it at goodreadingmagazine.com.au. My name's Greg Dobbs, and thanks for listening. This Good Reading Podcast was brought to you by Book People Gift Cards. Share the joy of reading with a Book People gift card. To find out more, visit bookpeoplegiftcards.org.au.